US President Donald Trump's tariffs will lead to a significant slowdown in global economic growth, according to the International Monetary Fund. The organization has revised its forecast and slashed expected growth for many major economies, with the US being worst affected. We are joined now by AJ Bell Investment Director Russ Mould. Russ, good to have you on the program once again. Now, that forecast by the IMF, we've seen this big slashing of the global economy's growth. But how much of it is attributed to Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs, which, by and large, for now, have been paused?
Yeah, that varies considerably country to country. And as you say, we're still about 80 days away from the president's deadline for when those reciprocal tariffs are imposed. And the Americans are still suggesting that there are deals waiting to be done there. But the IMF's major concern is indeed tariffs. But in many cases, the UK being a classic example and America another one, debt, the interest bills upon that debt are also a major drag on growth.
Yeah. And if that growth does slow in line with the IMF's forecast from 3.3% down to 2.8%, what does that actually mean for anyone that is watching this interview in terms of the cost of living, employment and trade?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And the big debate is, if these tariffs come in, will they be inflationary or not? And will they lead to a sustained increase in prices and a sustained increase in the cost of living, and therefore the dollars in people's pockets just won't go as far as they used to do previously? I suspect there will be an initial hit, but generally speaking, common sense says that the best cure for high prices is high prices, because eventually people can't afford to pay for them or won't pay for them or seek a cheaper substitute. So I think over the longer term, tariffs may actually be disinflationary, but equally, because they're destroying demand, they're bad for growth, and therefore they may in the long run, worst case scenario, be bad for jobs.
Yes, and many analysts have argued that the US would be the worst hit by this growth slowdown. Is that your assessment as well?
So that's the IMF's numbers, and if you look at the World Trade Organization's figures last week that they put out, again, they're forecasts, so they're not guaranteed to be right, but they're given in good faith. The World Trade Organization suggested that its trade flows would actually suffer most of all. I guess the comfort that we can take from that, even if America is the world's biggest economy, is the International Chamber of Commerce here in the UK says that 13% of global trade involves America, so 87% doesn't. So if there is indeed a sustained period of tension between the rest of the world and America, maybe the rest of the world can look to partner up and do something about it.
Yes, and of course, you're talking about the 80-day deadline for tariffs. That is a very long time in global politics, I would say. But, if that figure does change substantially, if the tariffs don't go ahead somehow, and if China and the US strike a deal?
I mean, I think that is the dream scenario for it. Certainly, if you're looking at it from the selfish perspective of financial markets, they were surged very strongly yesterday on President Trump's suggestion that the tariffs on China may not be ultimately as high as he's proposing at the moment at 145%, and that a deal could be done. But there's not long left. And I mean, the UK has been seeking a trade deal with America since 2020. It's not just a matter of agreeing a tariff. You're dealing with tax, you're dealing with labour, you're dealing with trading and product standards, you're dealing with customs checks on a product-by-product basis. So it's not as if we're just waving one product through. So these things can do and will take time, and 80 days really isn't very long.
Yes, and Donald Trump, he does want to negotiate with China on a trade deal. He has, I suppose, taken a back step in shielding electronics from that. But the actual negotiations haven't begun by all accounts. So do you expect China to make any concessions if there are talks between Beijing and Washington?
Well, this is the game of chicken that's going on between Beijing and Washington right now. President Trump has said that he's expecting China to call him. The Chinese have said, well, no, we're not. We're waiting for you to move. So I think we are waiting to find out who will blink first. It's interesting that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has been saying in America that the current level of tension is not sustainable, that it will do damage to the US economy. So maybe President Trump has been the first one to try and get something safe-faced, get a deal, and ultimately try and make sure that the financial markets in the US don't start to weigh upon the real economy, because they're still pretty unhappy with what's going on.
Yes, and Russ, this game of chicken has had a really topsy-turvy impact on global stock markets of late. But what do you make of the IMF's warning in quote saying that the new era of uncertainty also threatens to unleash turmoil in the world's financial markets?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge that we have is that since the great financial crisis of 2007 to 2009, central banks have managed to keep the show on the road. but they've generally sought to solve the debt crisis by encouraging more borrowing, by making that debt cheaper to service and cheaper to take on. And that means that debts have continued to grow. That's now not looking quite as easy a situation to sustain because inflation crept out of its box after COVID, because there was a lot of money created, and because interest rates have started to go up as a result. So the foundations for the global growth we've seen over the last 15 years just aren't that strong. I suspect that's one of the things that the gold price is telling us right now, we're reaching a new all-time high.
And Russ, finally, on to where you are in the UK. The figures have been released showing government borrowing exceeding forecasts to the tune of £15 billion. Is this a concerning development for the British economy?
It's part of this ongoing discussion that we've just been having about how debt has continued to grow very rapidly over the last 15 years. The UK's borrowing for the whole year fiscal year that we've just concluded was up a sixth year on year. It was much worse than the regulatory watchdog, the Office for Budget Responsibility, was expecting. And that is crimping the Labour government's room for manoeuvre here. It really would like to try and get the economy going, provide some fiscal stimulus, but it's having to try and keep the bond market, the government borrowing markets happy by saying, look, we're not going to go out and dash and spend, because we know what you thought of that when the Conservative government tried it in 2022. The financial markets had a fit. So they're very, very constrained in terms of what they can do to try and provide stimulus, much as they would like to, even before the Trump situation hit.
Yes, OK. Russ Mould, always good to get your analysis on the global economy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.